So just a big thank you to everyone for putting it all together, and it should be a fun day. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Michael.
Okay, so if you could switch over to the other slide. Yep, there we go. And go to
First one.
Okay,
So you need to turn around.
Here is 2004. I want to invite Dave Lumian to come up and talk about how it all started, because we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Dave. And
thanks, Tina. All right. Hi, I'm Dave Lumian, and I learned to sail in Newport Beach. I went to a city sailing program, and I was about 8 years old, and I must have loved it because I kept taking it over and over again. And when I was 10, I got myself a newspaper route through newspapers, made $25 a month. At the end of the year, I had $300, and I bought myself a Savick, and I loved that boat, and I sailed it all over Newport Harbor, and if I was not bigger than the boat, I'd probably still be sailing it. And just enjoyed it a lot. Went to a boys club summer camp, and nobody knew how to sail, so I taught everybody how to sail. So that was my first instructor experience. Yay! And then kind of ditched sailing for a while, and got back into it. My son got to be 8 years old, and I got him involved with a sailing program up in Marina del Rey. And a friend of mine who played tennis with said, oh, there's this really great club called Fairwind. And I joined Fairwind, and I went through the training program. It took me about a year. And then they said, well, you should be fleet captain. Okay, I'll be fleet captain. So I was fleet captain, went to my first board meeting, and it was announced that we had a 40% rent increase that our landlord had decided to put on us on our slips. 40% increase. And I said, who would do that? Why would they do that? And so I started looking around. I figured, well, gee, we only had 5 slips at the time. We had 2 14s, a G22, and 26, a 27, and 2 30s. That was the whole club. And we had lost a lot of our membership when there was that big downturn around 1980 in the aerospace industry, and hundreds of thousands of aerospace jobs went out of the region, and hundreds of thousands of construction jobs left the area. And that was our whole next generation. And the club was really, at that point, was really a lot of retired aerospace engineers who had been in the club for decades and were wonderful, but they weren't able to bring in the new blood. And we were down to about 50 members, and the idea, and our biggest expense was slips, and it was just going to, 40% was going to kill us. So I figured, and the county was saying there was a surplus of slips. There were too many slips in Marina del Rey. They wanted to get rid of slips. And so I called up all 18 anchorages in Marina del Rey, and they all said the same thing. Sorry, we're full. So I said, where are these extra slips? Well, there was one marina that was empty, and it was because they were getting ready to do reconstruction, redevelopment, and they weren't taking anyone in. So all the empty slips were in one empty marina. So it was like an artificial shortage of slips that this one developer was creating. His name was Doug Ring, and I found out that he had not gotten his approval from the Coastal Commission yet. And the Coastal Commission is supposed to safeguard public access to the coastline. And one of the defined areas of access is boating. We boaters, we create access to the coastline, and we're supposed to be protected. So I said, something's wrong here, and so I wrote up an appeal. I'm not a lawyer. I play one on TV, but I'm not a lawyer. And I wrote up an appeal and sent it to a friend of a guy that I met who worked on these kinds of issues. And he looked at it and he moved some things around for me and made it a little stronger. And then I filed it with the Coastal Commission. And I got a phone call from my friend, Aaron Clark. And he said, hey, Doug Ring is really pissed at you. He's going to call you. And I said, okay. So he called me up, and I said, he says, hi, I'm Doug Ring. I want to talk to you. I said, I'm Dave Luby, and I want to talk to you too. So we met in his office that afternoon. I walked in. I said, hi, I want to tell you about my club. I know about your club. I want to tell you about my concerns. I know about your concerns. Now, young man, I read them in your appeal. I read them in the newspapers. And I want to let you know that just because I'm a rich and successful businessman, you can't just walk into my office and put a gun to my head and get what you want. Okay. So he says, but I do know that what I'm doing is going to make it harder for people like you, and I want to help you. And so we worked out a deal where basically we got our slips, plus a few more, for 75% off. And it was the first time in the state of California there had been an affordable boat slipping agreement that would improve coastal access. But the proviso was that I had to go with Doug to the California Coastal Commission meeting down in San Diego and tell him what we were doing. I didn't have to endorse his project. I'm not an engineer or an architect. But I had to tell them about Fairwind. So I went and told them about Fairwind, and they flipped. They loved it. They said, gee, where have you been all our lives? And so they loved it. They approved it, and we moved ahead with Marina Del Rey. The next day, I got a phone call from Peter Douglas. And Peter Douglas was the founder of the California Coastal Commission. He wrote the California Coastal Act. I think it was Prop 22, wasn't it? That created the California Coastal Commission. He said, I want to work with you. I said, great, I want to work with you too. And so he became a mentor to me, and just was a wonderful man. He's unfortunately deceased, as is Doug as well. He was a wonderful man and was also a mentor to me. And Peter would call me up periodically and say, I really need your help on this, and would you come and testify before the commission, or would you come do this, would you come do that? And I said, great, I'll do it. And he would come up with ideas, and one of them was he called me up one day and said, hey, how about having Fairwind in Channel Islands Harbor? And I said, okay. And he said, well, you'll get a phone call in a few minutes from D.R. Horton, who's like one of the big, I said, D.R. who? Dr. Horton. And he said, well, they're like one of the biggest home builders in the United States. And this is their first coastal project. And so a few minutes later, I got a call from Nick Atkinson, I think. And he said, I want to work with you. I need you at the Coastal Commission meeting next month up in Sonoma. And so let's work out a deal. And so we worked out the deal to start Fairwind in Channel Islands Harbor. And they agreed to give us some slips, they agreed to give us some money, and we got it going through that. And so that's kind of how things got going here. So it's great. I like to think of Fairwind as one club with two amazing harbors. And I think, realize that we're a wonderful club, but we're also a public access vehicle that makes it possible for lots of people, not just club members, but also the general public, to come out and go sailing with us on our free sail days. And keep those ideas in mind and make friends in the government, because they can help. They like what we do, and they should be helping us more. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dave. A lot of interesting history there. A lot of that I didn't know. Okay. Go ahead and go to the next chart. Okay, so the first boat, so as Dave mentioned, D.R. Horton in that agreement provided some funding in addition to the slips, and part of that whole arrangement was linked to the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Oxnard and Port Hueneme, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But the club needed some boats up here. And the first boat was Catalina 27 that was actually purchased with some of that funding. It was owned by and raced by a former Fairwind member, and so the MDR folks knew about it, and it was up for sale. And it was purchased and brought up here, and actually was in a slip at Anacapa Isle, which is kind of on the same peninsula, but on the other side from where our boats are now. And then I'm going to invite Tom Marshall to come up, and he can tell you how Angel Sea got in, which is our second boat, and talk a little bit about that. This shows Dave, and I think this is probably either Angel Sea or Freedom 2, and then this is Angel Sea at one of our early open houses that we had at Peninsula Park, and because that was right next to where the boats were. So Tom, come on up.
Yeah, there were a number of things I wanted to talk about, but I think Dave covered most of them. But I had Angel Sea, and I couldn't afford to keep her, so I put her up for sale. And a friend of mine told me, hey, I know about this club. You ought to go talk to them. So Dave's trying to put together this deal for Channel Islands Harbor, and out of nowhere, I come with a boat for sale. So, but what the club existed of at the time were very basic sailors and nothing near this size. And the club said, oh, it's too expensive, we can't do that. And Dave came up with the idea of the lease with the option to buy. So again, with the way Dave works, it would have never happened without him putting down together that deal. So in the beginning, when we first started opening up here, our open houses, we would meet in Peninsula Park, we would barbecue, we would serve soft drinks, and then we'd take people out for a day sail saying, look, what a great club this is. So that's how we got started. And so I became a member of Fairwind, obviously. And barely 2 months after I joined the club, there's an annual Commodore's cruise on Catalina Island. And Dave said, hey, would you like to bring Angel Sea down to Catalina for me? Out of nowhere, again, I'm at this Commodore's cruise with all the Commodores from Southern California. And, I felt kind of out of place, but it was a marvelous experience. So, in a very short period of time, I went from having the boat for sale to going to the Commodore's cruise, getting active with Fairwind Sailing. So, that's me. I'll let Mike do the rest of the talking, but yeah, that's how I got involved.
Okay, why don't you hit the next slide and you can...
Oh yeah, that's the Commodore's cruise. And I don't know how Dave did it, but I think if I understand it or if I remember it right, most yacht clubs would have 2 people. And Dave managed to get us 4 slots. So there's 4 people from Fairwind Yacht Club.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thank you, Tom.
And so this is Tom and Chuck Orland, who's still a large boat member down in Marina del Rey, when Angel Sea in April of 2008 went to the MDR open house to kind of show the rest of the membership what about Angel Sea. Okay, let's move on now. So there are a number of members, I've talked with a few of them here today, that have been in Fairwind for a long time and as CIH members. I joined in June of 2007, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but either in late 2008 or early 2009, we were somewhat struggling up here, and Ken Murray was the Commodore at that time, and he arranged to ask a number of Marina del Rey members to transfer to CIH, which brought us membership that helped us really survive. So you can see the people that had joined early in 2005, 2006, 2007, some of those were then MDR members that were transferred over, and it got us some membership. When I joined in June of 2007, I was member number 7 up here. Okay. Tom was number 1. And I'm not sure what happened to the others, but we have had a variety of turnover. But we still have a lot of those early members. A number of them are here today. Go ahead and switch. Okay. So it's interesting. One thing that wasn't mentioned was we had Freedom 2, which was a medium vote at that time. We had Angel Sea, which was a large boat. There was no small boat here. We had to go down to Marina del Rey to train and get checked out on small boats. And so that was something that we figured out pretty quickly that we needed to solve that. But having had a lot of experience sailing, the other interesting thing was the small boats, and I think Dave mentioned it, there was the G22, there were the Solings. They didn't have auxiliary engines. They didn't have outboards. You sailed them out of the slip, you sailed them back into the slip. Okay, that's a little tricky. Fortunately, I had a lot of experience of that type of sailing, so I was able to get checked out on those boats quickly, and moved up within a couple weeks to medium because they needed a boat chief up here for Freedom 2 because the member from Marina del Rey had moved and he didn't want to be boat chief anymore. So I was quickly moved up to medium, got checked out on Freedom 2, and then had basically a beautiful Catalina 27 to myself for that whole summer. Because we were slowly getting members in. Okay, so another thing that happened in early 08 was the treasurer at the time decided he didn't want to be treasurer anymore, and unfortunately I raised my hand, and I became treasurer for 6 years. And so we had some representation for CIH on the board. And you can see a little bit later, Mike Strassman, who was one of our early members, became secretary. It wasn't until a little bit later when we started getting more representation. After 6 years on the board, I became Commodore for 2 years. And then we also had our committee chair, which later became the port captain. So we had a lot more representation, and as we went through this, we started getting a little bit more of a being able to operate somewhat separately from Marina del Rey, more like the way it is right now. So go ahead and flip to the next one. And again, we had, you can see we now had a port captain, totally separate membership, and we really could pretty much operate independently like we currently do. So that was kind of the evolution of that. Go ahead. Now I want to say a really big thanks to Marina del Rey for the help, because if we did not have their trainers, their instructors coming up and helping run our open houses, we would not have been able to get trained and checked out. Dave was instrumental with that. And later on, Mark Levine and Ken Murray, who were some of the early from my standpoint, 2008, 2010, they were on Commodore, first Mark Levine and then Ken Murray. They did a lot to help Channel Islands. And so they really got us going. Go ahead. Okay, so in December of 2007, Ken Murray called me up and said, hey, I saw a Craigslist ad for a Catalina 22 pretty cheap up at Lake Casitas. So Tom and I went up there, looked at it, and said, hey, this looks pretty good. And we got the funding. I think it was like $3,500. It was in the water, so and they had a trailer. So we towed it back, bought it, towed it back, and it went into massed up storage where Bandaloop is now, because we didn't have enough money to put it in a slip. Okay, so if you wanted to sail the boat, you had to call them up and say, put Turning Point in the water, and then you'd go out and sail, and then bring it back, and then go back on the trailer. So that was our first boat. The other thing that happened in that December is Dave ran a IQC up at Leo Robbins, and a number of the Leo Robbins folks and I got our 201s. So with that, it really opened the door. We had a small boat. I became an instructor. I could check people out, and things started really moving much quicker. Okay. A little bit later, this is Mike Strassman, who was secretary for a while. He was really good at spotting boats on Craigslist. There was a Capri 22 for sale at Lake Pleasant, north of Phoenix. And we said, hey, that's pretty good. How can we find out about this? Well, there was an MDR member that lived in Phoenix. He went up and looked at it, said, hey, that's a good boat. So we made the connection. I borrowed Tom's pickup. Jan and I drove out there because her brother lived out in the Phoenix area. We went up, bought it, and towed it back. And here we are just after we had put the mast up. And the next slide, the very next day, it was out sailing. We hadn't even named it yet. It got the desert wind because it came from the desert. So that was quite an adventure. Okay, so here I put this chart together. You can see the start when we got Freedom 2 and Angel Sea, and then Turning Point, and then Desert Wind. And once we had those boats, the membership started really climbing. Mike Strassman spotted another Capri 22. This was up in Stockton. We borrowed Tom's, a member and I borrowed Tom's pickup again. We drove up there and bought it, towed it back. Sweet deal. Well, that was a real good deal because it was here in Channel Islands Harbor. And we saw the Craigslist ad on Friday, bought it Saturday morning. We were the first ones there with money. Okay. Then sand was a little more challenging. It was down in San Diego. We had to borrow a trailer from somebody in massed up storage. And in that case, I borrowed Richard Windebag's pickup. We drove down there and brought the boat back. So this was a period of real growth, 2009, 2010. We also needed a medium boat and a large boat because we didn't, besides Angel Sea, we didn't have a large boat as an entry boat. I had to go down to Marina del Rey to get checked out on Catalina 30 as the first large boat. And so when Marina del Rey decided they wanted a new boat, they were going to sell Mark III, and about the same time they were going to sell Zephyr, we bought them from Marina del Rey. The nice thing about between Marina del Rey and Channel Islands, especially as I was treasurer, we kept the books separate. Okay, you didn't have to worry about any whining because somebody spent somebody else's money. So we literally purchased the boats from Marina del Rey. Okay, next slide. And it took me a little bit of digging, but these are membership numbers. I think that's Tom. This is me. And then it just ramped up to where we are now at about 270, and Oded can give me an exact number of regular members, but this was a pretty exciting time when our membership was going up and we were buying more boats. If you could go back one slide. Further out, we started doing fleet adjustment. So, and some of you may not realize this, but because right now, our Catalina 30s, they were originally in large. We moved them down to medium. Okay, and just likewise, Freedom 2 was moved down to small. So it was a fleet adjustment time. We also got Mistral and leased Island Star, which was a Catalina 38 for a little bit. Okay, go ahead and back. Okay, so the Boys and Girls Club program. So it was key to getting, with the arrangement with D.R. Horton, we started the Boys and Girls Club with 4 Capri 22s. 2 of them were given to us by Marina Del Rey. Then, let's see, Boys and Girls Club got a grant and bought 2 Capri 22, Capri 14. So we had 2 Capri 14.2s from Marina Del Rey and the 2 that, so we had the 4 boats in the summer of 2008, so it was the year after I joined. With Dave's help, we got the program kicked off, and I ran that for 6 years. Now when I became Commodore, Alan McGovern, Bob Chatnever took over, and then we've had Mike Christ ran it and Lauren Copas. So it's been a continuous program since 2008. Okay, and there's some of the kids. We had a lot of fun because we'd train them and then we'd turn them loose, which was always exciting. We had a safety boat to go get them out of trouble, but then we taught them how to race, and they loved to race. So we had a lot of that going on. Okay, next. Let's see, summer of 2008, Dave had another IQC. I got my 203, 204, 205, so I was then able to move people up to medium, also get them cruise rated. We started having lots of club cruises. That was basically initially Angel C and Mark III, the Catalina 30, and a lot of those were 104s to get people cruise rated. We had a lot of meetings here and events. A lot of families started getting involved, and we got the landing permits with the Nature Conservancy, and that was in part due to Ken Confrey. Ken, raise your hand. He got me linked up with the folks at the Nature Conservancy, and we were able to cut that deal to get permits for our boats rather than individual permits for each individual. Go ahead, switch. Okay, so here's Mark III and Angel C at anchor. I think this was at Smugglers. We gradually started adding boats to the fleet, and the cruises got a lot more interesting. Go ahead. So this is the second 10 years. We see the lease with Island Star. Island Star was a good sailing boat. It was a old style Catalina 38, but it wasn't a good cruising boat. So we decided to cancel that lease and acquired Wojo. So then later on, more recently, we've done more upgrades where we've added another Catalina 380, Big Z, we added Charm, and now we've started doing some changes to the small boat fleet as well, with the addition of Ragdoll and the newer Catalina Capri 22 Fairwind. Next. And so as time went on, we had an independent harbor committee which allowed self-governance. The membership has slowed, but it is continuing to go up. And we've gone from what was a pretty wild growth mode and purchasing boats to more of an enhancement mode where we're replacing boats with newer boats. And right now we're right-sizing the membership classes. And last, let's go sailing. So that's everything I have.
Anniversary. It started me thinking because I joined in 2020, so that was only 6 years ago. Just right 2 weeks before COVID lockdown. But after a couple of years, when I retired, I got more involved in volunteering and Friday Fix-It days and some other things. I worked on some electronics on the boats. And I started to realize that what makes this club work and keeps it affordable, it's all about members who volunteer their time and expertise. From day one, I had some great trainers who not only got me checked out, but also got me ASA qualifications for free. I actually did my 104 and 114 up in San Juan Islands, which I decided I wanted to do a nice trip. But it was very expensive, and that's what most people have to go through to get their 104. We do it totally for free, and we have instructors who give up their weekends to do that, which is a great thing. So showing up on monthly work days, I really just barely scratched the surface of what it takes to keep our boats going. And as I got more involved, I realized the amount of work that goes into making the club tick, not just maintaining boats, but behind the scenes, all the people on the board, the trainers, instructors, etc. So we always rely on the hard work and experience of a small number of long-term members who are our brain trust, like Mike Delaney, Alan McGovern's here, and Dennis Durley, and Hal, and we have probably a dozen people that we our go-to people in the club. So in preparation for today's celebration, I actually read a lot of old club newsletters. They're actually all available on our website. It's very interesting reading. I went back to 2004, which is where I found out about the proposal for Channel Islands. But one name that appeared regularly as a contributor and a volunteer, as a member of the board or committee, an instructor, a boat chief, running the Boys and Girls Club, and the list goes on. And I'm sure you know who this is. It's Michael Delaney. He may not have started the club, but he joined in 2007. And since then, he's been instrumental in growing and sustaining it. And early on, he got involved and made a great impression. You see, these are extracts from the newsletter. I won't read them all, but basically, he became Volunteer of the Month in October 2007. In December, the new small boat Turning Point was commissioned, and Mike became the boat chief and obtained his ASA instructor certificate. In 2008, he joined the board as treasurer. I think he mentioned that. And Mark Levine wrote some very nice praise word about amazed at the calibre and quality of our volunteers, pleased at the growth of our Channel Islands Harbour. In July 2008, we went from 4 to 37 members at Channel Islands Harbour. And Mike Delaney does so much for this club besides doing an excellent job as treasurer. It's hard to imagine how we could function without his expertise and contributions. So there's a lot of praise, and as I joined, I used to ask Mike a lot of things. So he's still around and helping us. And in 2011, he was actually honoured for service to sailing with the prestigious Charles Langley Trophy. And it's the Pacific Coast from Vancouver to San Diego. So Fairwind nominated him for that, and he received that trophy.
I
Found
think
that
actually
picture.
Dave Lumian nominated me for that.
Okay.
For the, all the work with Channel Islands and the Boys and Girls Club.
Right. Yes. So, if you just look at what the breadth of things that Mike's done since he joined, he's had all the different officer positions, served on the election committee, behind the scenes work, doing insurance, analysis, Survey Monkey, started the Boys and Girls Club program for 6 years, you did that? And ASA instructor. I mean, a lot of people here have been trained and checked out by Mike. And also a boat chief and regular volunteer for boat projects, including installing a new engine in Mark III. So we owe a lot to Mike's work. And just to say, I just want to give him a big round of applause.
Thank you very much. I was on one of those boats during.
So